everyone.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, whenever it is, wherever you are. Why am I happy? Why am I excited? It's Peikoff Wednesday, and we are glad you are here. Join us in the chat and talk back because this is Peikoff Wednesday. Yes, we've been doing these shows. James Valliant, the star of this show, has been coming to you every Friday since I don't know when. I've had the honor of co-hosting, but it's time to change it up. It's now Peak Wednesdays, and if you're in the United States, it's Wednesday morning. First morning show for ARCUK. I know it's afternoon there, but hey, at least we're not going to keep you folks in Europe up all night. No, we'll give you good stuff to start your day. James Valiant, it is good to talk to you in the morning. How are you doing today?
I am doing wonderful, and you are also a star of this program, sir. Your wisdom I find constantly of value, and somehow you have this knack of saying exactly what I personally need to hear. So, sir, you teach me a great deal, and I want to thank you for that. Yeah, we're on Wednesdays now. This probably should work out a little better, maybe for Ayn Rand Center UK schedule. I hope it works out for all you guys in the audience, but do know now we've moved to Wednesdays from Fridays.
Yeah, and I hope that proves to be groundbreaking, that we get more folks who come on board. You know, we've done shout outs to the ARCUK, who host this, who sponsor everything that we're doing here. And we want you to be members, you folks listening right now, folks in the chat, folks who are just listening afterward. We want you to be members of the ARCUK. Go to aynrandcenter.co.uk, click membership, become a member. But what we haven't talked about much is most of our audiences within the objectivist community, or at least people who are curious, interested in the ideas of Ayn Rand. Lord knows most of us still consider ourselves students of these ideas. We're not necessarily experts. But this channel is made up of SMEs, subject matter experts. In other words, not necessarily objectivists, but people with a passion for these ideas. I'd love to see more morning shows. I'd love to see more shows in general. So yeah, by all means, if you are already a member, even if you're not, you should inquire. You should contact the folks at the Ayn Rand Center UK if you think you've got something to offer the channel, because I want more partners. I love the shows we've got. The Daily Objective coming up today is going to be super compelling. Nikos Sotirakopoulos, who now works with the Ayn Rand Institute, but still is an integral part of the Ayn Rand Center UK, is going to present his thoughts on Iran. That's going to be good. But I would love to see more morning shows too.
You know, if you're a paid subscriber to the Ayn Rand Center UK, you get all kinds of additional perks. And on Sundays, we do in-depth discussions of various lectures and material from objectivists from Ayn Rand, especially Leonard Peikoff now. We've gone through some of his most substantive courses. This Sunday, after a small hiatus, we're beginning again on Sunday to discuss material by Dr. Peikoff. This Sunday, it will be Dr. Peikoff's lecture, Certainty and Happiness. And after that, we're going to go into an in-depth discussion of objectivism, the philosophy of Ayn Rand, his monumental treatise on Ayn Rand's philosophy. I wonder if Daniel, our amazing producer, could put a link in the show notes to show how people can subscribe to that. But if you are interested in this material, do consider becoming a paid subscriber for a very low monthly rate. You get all kinds of perks, and you can participate in discussions about Dr. Peikoff's work or Ayn Rand's work, and actually ask questions and interact. So please do consider becoming a paid subscriber. Boy, that was a long intro.
Well, I'll tell you, Certainty and Happiness, Achieving Success in Thought and Action, that was a formative lecture for me. You know, early in objectivism, and Dr. Peikoff releases that lecture, and it's so good, so clarifying. You can tell how powerful it is because a substantial part of it is reproduced in OPAR, in Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand. So it's great to hear that you're starting up Sunday mornings again after just a couple weeks off. It wasn't that long, and you're back. So that's available for members on Sunday mornings. But if you're not yet a member, we're going to dig right into Keeping It Real. We have been discussing this book now for weeks, and it's so rich. Now, last week we talked about career. We talked about determining what it is you want to do professionally with your life. We're going to dig in one more time because there's still some question of, and especially for young people or people like me who are changing careers later in life, what about practicality? So let me go right into question number one, and we'll do a little more promotion a little bit later. Question number 1. I am experiencing a conflict between what I want and what is practical. I want to write nonfiction, but I also don't want to worry about money, where my next meal is coming from, buying new shoes, and so on. I love the way the questioner says shoes, not clothes. I wonder if that's an indication of something there. Anyway, the questioner wraps up, what should I do? And let me just read the first part of Dr. Peikoff's answer. He says, the first thing I would say is that choice is not sacrifice. Anytime you act, you are selecting one course over another. That doesn't mean you're sacrificing the first for the second. Sacrifice is defined by your hierarchy of values. If you choose the higher value and give up the lesser, well, that is not a sacrifice. That's your choice. Now, if you choose the lesser and give up the higher, that is a sacrifice. You have to decide, in an issue like this, which is the higher value to you. Now, you know yourself best, so you know your own hierarchy. But if I just took the question straight, well, I'd advise you to go to the practical career, not the writing. Writing, at least to the best of my knowledge, is a tremendous struggle. It has the potential to make you miserable from the demands of creativity. I would only advise a person to take that kind of career if they have a passion for writing, such that all these other things, shoes and restaurants and nightclubs and so on, are irrelevant. Now let me stop for now there, because the answer is just, we've discussed the film Whiplash before, that single-tracked, single-minded devotion to a passion. And Dr. Peikoff appears to be saying here that unless you are Miles Teller, unless you have that single-tracked devotion, you should consider the practical career, the moneymaker. He says, well, if these other things, the shoes and restaurants and whatnot, if these other things are important to you, well, that's perfectly okay. It's perfectly moral. There's no obligation to go into a profession like that. There's no obligation to go at all, easy or hard. If you prefer a different kind of life and you still are using your mind productively. If you do choose non-writing for that kind of valid reason, then I would say do it guiltlessly. Don't feel, oh, I'm just doing the practical and abandoning the moral. In your context, if you are weighing values appropriately, you should be guiltless and enjoy your new shoes.
I love that.
Unless
Get those Bruno Mollies.
Yeah, he does go back and give the proviso at the end, unless it kills you not to write. In which case, then you don't care that much about the shoes. Now, it was interesting because again, listening to reading Dr. Peikoff, my initial reaction was a bit mixed. I thought, well, does that mean nobody should go after a passion project? And what's interesting is I went and listened to the original podcast. That these were all originally podcast answers, oral answers. Dr. Peikoff prepared, but these were given on his podcast and then edited for the book. So I listened to the original podcast, and after the answer, it's interesting because the gentleman who's working with him, see if you recognize this voice, gives him a devil's advocate question, or as he says, a writer's advocate question.
Not to write, in which case then you don't care that much about the shoes.
Okay.
Play writer's advocate. I mean, if a person is young, he can lack knowledge, A, about what he really does value in the career realm, and B, what are the real prospects as a writer. I mean, he could very well be wrong about them. I mean, some of us at ARI do okay. So don't you think it's relevant to bring up to such a person that, maybe you should just try it and see if this is really something that you can be passionate
you can always
about.
say, if you're not sure, then try it and see. But also trying it and see, the shorter your time interval of trying, the less you're going to find out, the less you're going to see. So does he want to take off a year? Does he want to take off 2 years and write a whole book? Does he have an interest in writing a short op-ed type column? That's all things he'd have to decide. I'm simply saying creative writing as a lifetime, which is what he wants to know. Should he choose that, or should he choose the practical?
Now that was interesting to me because, of course, we all recognize Don Watkins' voice. Don has been a part of the ARCUK. He has given actual seminars to members only, as well as being part of the TDO, the Daily Objective. And so it's great to hear Don on that.
And a brilliant writer, by the way, as well. So it's particularly appropriate coming from a master communicator like Mr. Watkins.
And I'm thinking I should reach out to Don and ask him, yeah, how do you feel about asking Dr. Peikoff? Because I can see both sides of that. I can see, because I've done this myself now. I've been in early retirement for 3 years working on an intellectual career. I wonder how Don feels about that now, because he's a great writer. He has
Yes.
released both fiction, he has worked or nonfiction. He has worked with Yaron Brook on several of his books, and he has released fiction. His book I Am Justice. If you haven't read that yet, you'll find it on Amazon. And I wonder, how is Don feeling about that now? I think writing is his passion to such a degree that when Dr. Peikoff says,
Oh,
"Unless
yeah.
it kills you not to write," and I think Don is one of those
My
ones.
oldest friend in the world is a writer, a professional writer, and he's done everything. He's edited journals, he's edited databases, he's written plots for video games, he's ghost written books for other people, but he's also written numerous novels, he's written nonfiction material and essays, and he always wanted to do that from the time he could possibly remember. He wanted to write, and he knew it would be difficult. He knew that it would not be easy. He knew how hard it is to break into the field. He knew what a challenge it was. If it wasn't his single devotion, if it wasn't the passion that he knew was right for him, and no matter what the existential circumstances in the decades ahead for him would be, he was willing to take them on. Now, did that mean he had to take a bunch of practical jobs to help him get by? Just like Ayn Rand did when she was an early writer. She worked in the wardrobe department at the movie studio RKO. She sold subscriptions to the Hollywood Reporter door by door when she lived in Hollywood. She took all kinds of waitress, even at the time. She took all kinds of jobs just so she could write. And that's what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to be like Howard Rourke working in that stone quarry. So you better have that devotion to get through the hard times. But if you do, you'll still be happy because you'll be doing what you love. You'll be doing what really moves you. If that's the kind of life that can make you happy, that is to say, if you know you're not going to get the Bruno Magli shoes and the nice new car, at least maybe not when you want them, then take that career. But you have to, that's no sacrifice. That's no sacrifice. That's the choice of the greater value over what is to you the lesser value. For many of us, there are multiple careers that we could have enjoyed or been good at. But we have to make a selection. If I'm going to really enjoy and really be good at one career, I've got to make a selection. I can't, I myself had multiple choices in front of me. Do I become an intellectual, a historian? Do I become an attorney, a trial attorney? For a long time, I became a trial attorney, realizing that other was a lesser value to me, at least at that time. I think that's really important. Context and selection is not sacrifice. And we have to be realistic about the limitations of our time and our energy and our need to focus on what we're doing. That's what we're going to really enjoy. That's what we're really going to be good at. That's what we're going to get self-esteem and that positive feedback from.
Excellent. Now, let me know if this will throw you off, because I just decided I need to take moderator's prerogative and go to question 3 before question 2. And let me know if that's a problem, but I think there's a relationship here that I really want to explore.
In fact, I was unsure about which order to put those 2 questions in, so do it.
Good. Well, I think the connection will be clear. The next question then. I am a student. If I become a fiction writer, incidentally, I think we've discussed this question before, but this belongs right here. If I become a fiction writer, won't I have to surrender the possibility of ever being number 1 in my field? That is, won't I have to acknowledge the fact that Atlas Shrugged is the pinnacle of literary achievement? I don't think I could accept a career where number 2 is the best I could do. Now,
Isn't that kind of sad?
Yeah, Dr. Peikoff starts off with, and I think the same reaction that we have to that.
Yeah.
This is a huge mistake because you're judging your work by a comparative standard. You're taking someone else's work and saying, well, is mine better or not? That is a complete error. If you are in a creative field, and all work is creative, and you love the work, and your work is worth doing, it has a value in and of itself. Your standard should not be, well, is it the best? It should not be, is it better than somebody else's? But, is it good? Does it have value? Have I achieved something rational, something creative, something that is worth doing and advances my life? And if it does, human life as such. The relation of your achievement to other work is irrelevant. And then he says, I'll take myself as an example. I think that some of my books, at least, and some articles and courses have been of value. If I had started out by saying, well, I'm going to write the dim hypothesis or OPAR, but my standard is going to be, is this better than Ayn Rand? Or is this better than Aristotle? Oh, I would have been utterly paralyzed. It would have been inconceivable. And he goes on a bit, but I think that's clear. And I think that one of the challenges when you think to get into a field like writing, or for me, being a public intellectual, or being a musician, another one of my
Any
side projects.
any creative work is going to have this kind of issue in some form, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm never going to be, Rachmaninoff or Toscanini, or even,
Can you imagine? Can you imagine starting out as someone wanting to be a professional piano player, say, and comparing himself to the technique and the fingers of Sergei Rachmaninoff? That would be paralyzing. You'd stop before you even started. How could I possibly have the fingers of Sergei Rachmaninoff, the brilliant emotional technique of Rachmaninoff? That would be utterly paralyzing. On the other hand, if I approached it as, what kind of music do I like? How do I measure myself against my own progress? You know, one of my favorite quotes on this subject comes from another musician, the legendary cellist Pablo Casals. They were asking him, I think he was 85 or something, and he was still taking cello lessons. He was considered the greatest cello player on earth at the time. Every other cello player in the world wished they could play half as well as this master. They said, why are you still taking lessons?
Surprised. They said, why are you still taking lessons?
Lessons. I think I'm making some progress, he said.
Yeah, love that answer.
We never, ever, the challenge never ends if the challenge is ourselves and beating our last best, doing the best that we can do. And if you're an author, say, of course you're writing the best book you can imagine being written, or don't write it. So this is the book I want. This is the book I would enjoy reading. This is the book that I would have wanted to be out there. That's how I approached my books. This is the book that I would enjoy reading the most. This is the best I can do. Of course, you're writing the best book you can imagine being written. I never had any illusions that it would have the same kind of impact of Atlas Shrugged or Introduction to Objectivist Epistemology. I realized that if I were to compare my work to that, that would be absolutely insane. The question is, am I doing something creative to the best of my ability? In which case, I am as proud as I could be, and on my level, just as proud as Ayn Rand was, even though her achievement was 1,000 times bigger than whatever I could do. That can't be a comparative standard with other people is the road to unhappiness, frustration, and defeat. We are all individuals, and if we do it right, we all have something unique to contribute if we do it right. No, I'm not. If you're a scientist, you're probably not going to be Isaac Newton. Most aren't. But guess what? You can be the best darn physicist you can be. You can be powerfully creative. You can be proud of what you do. You can enjoy your work, and you can do something very important. That just because you're not Isaac Newton doesn't mean that you couldn't have a absolutely powerful career as a physicist. That seems absurd, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Kind of sad if you're looking at it that way.
And I can't even imagine, because would you apply that standard to if your passion was in organization and you wanted to be an office manager? But I don't want to be an office manager unless I can be the best office manager that ever existed on the planet. Now, if I want to be a musician, look at these hands. These are good hands, but these are not pianist's hands. I will never be Rachmaninoff, or I might not even have rhythm. I could think of, if you've seen the movie Shine, you've got this man who is passionate about the piano, but he's terribly autistic, He doesn't have much natural talent, but he loves it. David Helfgott, and he chooses the career, and constant obstacles, and he will never be the world's greatest interpreter of Rachmaninoff. But how many people can do what he does with Rachmaninoff? How many people can do what this man does? He's enormously entertaining. He's very inspiring considering his obstacles. Does it matter that he will never be the best?
And besides, best is always best in a certain context. In
Yes.
this context, the question is, are you doing the best you can do? And that's got to be the source of your pride. To compare yourself to other people, to get pleasure, for example, in the vice, weakness, or incompetence of someone is the same problem looked at the other way around. You can't get any value from their lack of virtue, nor can you actually suffer, in effect, from someone else's greater achievement. You don't know what their context was. You don't know what background they had. You've got a context. You've got to appreciate your context. Yeah, I did. Early on, I had to surrender my dreams of being a star in the NBA. Early on, I had to, it was always unrealistic for me to think of myself as being, say, a ballet star. I was never going to do that. Within the range of my capacities, I had to determine these things. But this is also true in terms of context in what you're doing.
Yes.
The fact that there's someone better, I go out and be a trial lawyer. When I first started being a trial lawyer, I'd go look at other great trial lawyers and how they were working. Right? I get my work done so I could go check them out and watch them cross-examine a murder suspect or something to take notes on how to do that. But I'm looking up to them. I'm taking notes. I'm not copying them, and I'm not comparing myself. I'm using what I can from their material, and I'm going to do things my own way. So long as you're being creative, so long as you're contributing, you're not a second-hander if you're admiring someone as even being better in some ways at the field that you are. Quite the opposite, quite the opposite. I can imagine being a brilliant, successful, creative novelist and saying, well, it's not Victor Hugo, it's not The Fountainhead. Well, okay, it's still a brilliant novel. It still moved people. It's still, there's plenty of room for values on the banquet table of life. Just because something isn't, say, the prime rib with au jus doesn't mean that it isn't a value, and worth, including in the cornucopia of values that life represents.
Yeah, I have a figure of speech I use a lot, and it sometimes gets me in trouble, especially in the objectivist community, which is good is good. It seems like that would follow from A is A. Good is good, but in an era where people are fighting against participation trophies, some people take that to mean accepting less than you could do. No, no, no. As objectivists, as advocates of objectivity, reality, good is good. You mentioned ballet. Think of Robert Begley, who is not the world's greatest ballet dancer, but he's good, and he loves it. And it's just so amazing.
He took me to ballets, and he took me to see himself do ballet. What was this, 40 years ago in New York City? And he loved it, and he was in great shape, and he was good. But was that his primary career? No, he loved to do it, so he wasn't going to stop him from doing it. The fact that he would not be a ballet star, internationally famous ballet star, didn't stop him from doing it. He was just really, really good. And he taught me I never had an appreciation for ballet before him. So in terms of doing what he was loving doing, improving, he was devoted to doing the best. And this is the key. Are you doing the best you can in that context and in that field? Because that's what was giving him all kinds of self-esteem and, a chance for creative expression as well. The fact that he couldn't be Mikhail Baryshnikov, his hero, did not prevent him from pursuing something he loved. And that's the key here. And he became good at it, and he improved, and he got very proud at it, and it was beautiful. He may not have been Mikhail Baryshnikov, but it was beautiful to see him doing it, because he did become good, and he was doing what he loved to do. And doing what you love to do pushes you on to become better than you were before.
Yes,
and
it affects everything else. Makes me think of Goodenough in Die Hard. It's like, whoa, what's this Russian ballet dancer doing in this action film? He's doing what he loves. That's what he's doing.
He
He's doing the
loves.
things he loves. Speaking of people I love, the chat is now going. Bonnie started as one of my favorite people. Bonnie started off the chat, and Dr. Ribbons has joined us as well. Equal to Reality asks, why is this coming on so early? See, you missed the beginning of the show. It's now Peikoff Wednesdays, and it's ARC UK's first morning show. Well, Equal to Reality's in the UK, so call it ARC UK's first afternoon show. And that's the answer to your question. We have our first super chat of the day from Jonathan Honig. Always good to see Mr. Honig in the chat, especially when he can break away from his star-studded career as a finance guy on MSNBC and, of course, running Capitalist Pig. Thank you for that, Jonathan. And Jamie Hernandez is also into the super chat. Thank you for that as well. If you put in a chat comment with $1 on it, you can hit the little dollar sign there. You think there might be a little pound sign. Maybe that's what it looks like if you're in the UK. You can ask your questions, make them stand out. Money doesn't go to me, doesn't go to Mr. Valliant. It goes to the ARC UK, which is exactly where we want it to go. You are supporting the Ayn Rand Center UK with every super chat you put in. So thank you very much for that.
Yes.
And I'm going to jump to
We should
question
turn it into a
3.
morning show kind of format where we have cute jokes and we're drinking our coffee like I am.
We are. We need to be a little more pumped up, and I'm going to work
A little more pumped up. Exactly.
because I was talking to you previously earlier before the show that is going to be part of my project, is to bring even more passion into these shows, and that's why I'm calling out to every one of you out there who has an interest in Ayn Rand's ideas. We on the ARC UK we do clubhouse shows. So even if you're like, I'm not really ready to be on video yet, you could host clubhouse sessions. There are so many things you could do. Reach out to the ARC UK, become a bigger part of what's going on here. Equal to Reality says it's 16:27, so 4:27 in the afternoon here in the UK. Yes, I am fully aware of that, but thank you for explaining it to the folks who don't know military time. Just kidding, of course. But yes, we're a morning show in the States. We're an afternoon show in Europe. There are places in the world where they're just going to bed. We get it. 24 hours, it's a big world. We want 24-hour shows. ARC, can you imagine if we had 24-hour content? Now, I know there's already so much you don't have time to watch it all, but more is better. This is America. I keep saying America. This is the world. More is better. Read Alex Epstein. More is better.
More better, yes.
And I'm going to stop getting distracted by the chat for just a moment. I'll get back to that in a moment because I want to read the question that I delayed. Question number 2. Now question number 3. Because this is, well, let me read it. Is it a mistake to entertain a strong desire for something that is impossible, or to fantasize about what one would do in life if circumstances were different? For example, would it be wrong for a blind person to burn with desire to become a pilot? Or for a person to spend large amounts of time thinking about what he would do if he could go back 20 years with the knowledge he has now? And right away, my thought on this as well. The way you ask the question, and that's exactly how Dr. Peikoff answers it. He says, as presented, yes, this is 100% a mistake. To have a brief desire to do something that is impossible, to have an idle, occasional fantasy about what you would have done differently if you'd known, well, that's fine. But to do it in the way you describe here, to burn with desire, to spend large amounts of time, that is thoroughly self-destructive.
Yeah.
It completely takes you away from the reality of your life. It is the mental equivalent of joining a monastery, cutting yourself off from action, from value, from gain. It's just as senseless as saying, is it okay if I have a burning desire to jump unaided to the moon?
Mm-hmm.
If that is your desire, that is a psychological problem. And Dr. Peikoff goes on to give the objectivist perspective on that, of being reality-based. And that one seems pretty straightforward, but then when you think about some of the earlier questions, well, should I even get into a career if I can't be number one, if I can't be the best? So my take on this was we're constantly reminded of you're not deciding on a career, you're not answering philosophical questions completely disconnected from reality. This is a philosophy for living on Earth.
Right. It wasn't that, for example, if someone burns with desire, to use the example I used before, being a ballet, prima ballerina, or being a top star in the national basketball, NBA, and one simply does not have the capacity to do it. You don't have to be, I mean, if you could be, if it's possible for you and you'd enjoy it and that's your life's career, I mean, go for it, even if you're not going to be numero uno, even if by some comparative standard, you're not going to be the best. If that's the career for you, do it. On the other hand, you have to be realistic about what you can and can't do. I simply did not have the physique, say, to be a ballet dancer, and that just would not be good for me. I would enjoy it. I wouldn't be very good at it. And that's the kind of realism that we have to bring. More than that, there are all kinds of realism issues, practical, real world issues that make things difficult or impossible that just aren't worth it or are simply impossible. And we have to be recognize that. In living in contempt, there's a point we touched on last week. There are all kinds of more options in careers and jobs as the economy develops and sophisticates. 200-300 years ago, there were just fewer career options available to choose from. What's the best career for me to choose from among, something I can count on two hands? Whereas today we have hundreds of career options, thousands of career options to choose from. And yeah, we have to choose the one that suits us best. And we cannot entertain ones that will only lead to frustration because, in fact, they're impossible. If my burning desire is to flap my wings and fly to the moon, like Dr. Peikoff says, then obviously I'm just beating my head against the wall. I'm going to be frustrated. People can see it when you make it that unrealistic, but truly there are a whole range of careers that are just that unrealistic. Let's take medicine. For me, I'm sorry, I can't handle the idea of blood and grossness. And there are people who just love helping other people. That's their passion. They can't imagine going into any other field but medicine. I just don't have the psychology for that. That would be, I could not relax and enjoy myself when people are in immediate health crisis, say in an emergency room, or if I had to be a surgeon cutting someone up, that's not for me, psychologically even. We're not even talking about physically or existentially in the economy, but all of those are realistic factors that you have to take into account. To burn for the impossible is simply self-destruction. You really have to get your head out of the impossible clouds and back into reality. What is possible for me? What can I do? What would I enjoy doing in my context? Those are the important questions. If something is truly impossible, let it go. It can be an occasional fantasy, I suppose. It can be maybe a hobby that you do part-time on Saturdays or something, but you have to be realistic about what you can and can't actually do.
Excellent. And that connects back to what we were talking about earlier. Dr. Peikoff explains that, there are plenty of things a blind person can do, which are great mental challenges beyond becoming a pilot. And there are plenty of things you can do, even if you're 65, that leave ample room for self-expression. No matter how badly you mangled your life 20 years ago, live it now. Now, when we were talking about romance and sexuality, the topic of fantasy came up. Another one where you can live in a fantasy world, or you can simply use fantasy as part of creativity, part of reading your own mind.
Great comparison, Robert.
Yeah, and reading it came up for me because it's fun. On Clubhouse, there's a group that gets together in the mornings, and it's What Are You Joyful About Today, led by a gal that calls herself Joy Ann, like Joanne, but Joy. And the reason I found it is because Linda Cordera is there most mornings. Linda Cordera of Quint Cordera Fine Art. Cordera.com, you know where to go. And it's interesting. There's a gal, they take turns, what are you joyful about today? And I'll say what I'm joyful about. You can imagine I soapbox a bit. And there's a gal there who gets on usually toward the end, and she sings. And she sounds, I don't know, a little very shy, a little awkward, but then she sings and she's got this amazing voice. And so she ends up talking longer than anybody, or singing longer than most people do. And I thought, well, that's really neat. And she's in there most mornings, and the host really knows her. I only found out after, being in there, and I don't go every day, but, after weeks I had kind of come back And it was mentioned that, you know, she goes to like old folks' homes. I don't know if that's the right word for them anymore. There's probably a more PC way to say that, but she goes to the elderly and she sings and she talks about the reaction she gets and people love her. And I only found out this week she's blind. This did not come across in any of the previous times that she had spoken. It's nothing that she's ever complained about. It just happened to come up. I thought that's so wonderful. It would be wonderful either way. But knowing that she's following her passion, because you can tell by the way she sings, she loves it. And she's a joyful person. And I thought, you know, how many people do we know who say, yeah, I want to do this as a career, but, you know, if I can't be number one or if it doesn't make enough money. And I get it, and those things all matter, but
talk about a wonderful attitude.
yeah.
I mean, there are so many career choices now that no matter what our disabilities, no matter what our context, you know, there almost certainly is some career out there that you'll find fulfilling and rewarding. You know, after 18 years of doing work that I loved being a public prosecutor, and I just loved getting up every single morning. I was excited to go to work, and I just loved what I anticipated with joy, the fun and the challenges that lay ahead of me for the day. And when you enjoy work, like being a trial lawyer was so much fun, and putting bad guys behind bars was so much fun. I had some serious health issues and you know, being a trial lawyer is high pressure, high intensity. You have to be there on schedule. So if you have health issues, you can't really do that. I had to make a career choice. Really horrible decision. I have to leave this career that I love and go on to another. That's a realism issue that may not occur back when you're in your teens or 20s when you're deciding these things, but happen later on in life when you're in your 40s or 50 or something. And those can be particularly challenging because now something that you've devoted your entire life to, you can no longer do, and you've got to find a whole new productive purpose. No matter what the challenge in life is, whether it's a health issue or blindness, we have to take stock of what we can do, what is possible for us. But believe it or not, I am convinced, look at what I've done now. I have changed, I've shifted gears in terms of my career. I have gone into the things that I knew I could have also entered, but had chosen not to because I wanted to be a trial lawyer. So there's almost certainly a career out there that you can find passion and joy and reward in doing, and great self-esteem in doing it well. No matter what your limitations these days. It's one of the great things about contemporary society. Like I was saying, division of labor has created so many choices now. Surely there's a career that you can find joy and great reward in doing.
It's got to be an advantage of having a philosophical perspective, is that if you're forced out of a concrete, you can still embrace the abstractions. Like in your case, I can imagine, you know, 10, 15, 20 years ago, people asked you, who do you work for? You know, I work for justice. I argue for virtue. And that's exactly what you're doing now.
Oh, thank
You're
you.
still working for justice and you are still arguing for virtue. And
well, that is exactly how I see it. Thank you, Robert. You see, your values don't change. What you're doing is you're finding the new form of expression for it. You know, your comparison to romance is just absolutely brilliant in so many ways. You know, sometimes in life you'll have a romantic relationship and it just doesn't work out for whatever reasons that don't involve any immorality or dishonesty on the part of either party. It just doesn't work out for whatever circumstances there are. You've got to be just as realistic about that and move along, say, just as you do about a career and move along, say, if it's not working out. But guess what? Just as they say in the romantic field, look, there are other fish in the sea. So I would say in the career field, surely in our modern economy, there are other career fish in the sea that you can find reward from.
just so. Shout out to John in the chat. Thank you for your $5 super chat. That goes right to support the ARCUK, and it is very much appreciated. Equal to Reality says, I can't believe I missed International Talk Like a Pirate Day on Monday. Well, I'll talk about that at the end because I'll be talking about that tomorrow on me show. But before we get into that, somebody asks Dr. Peikoff, at the age of 21, oh, kid, I'm going to be 21 again.
Yes.
What was the earlier question? I keep wishing you could go back to an earlier age, knowing what you don't know. Haven't we all asked that? At the age of 21, I've been spoon-fed all my life, taken my family for granted. I feel like I haven't ever really earned anything. Is it right for me to suffer now and put up with hardships for myself in order to become more independent? I have to laugh at the way the question, I could imagine asking this question earnestly at 21.
Yes.
I can't, but especially being, older. Somebody in the chat earlier said, "Hey, boomer." I think a question that says, should I have to pay my dues? So I'll just read the beginning of Dr. Peikoff's answer to kick this off. He says, in a general case, I would answer, well, no, you should definitely not do that. At your age, if your parents are helping to educate you, your concern should be to acquire knowledge and become independent in your thought. You're not yet at the stage at which you should be independent in material existence and self-sustenance. Of course, if you are, that's fine, but it's perfectly proper for you to take money for education from them. The fact that you should be self-supporting is only applicable in context. It's up to your parents to see that you're capable of doing that by giving you the right education. Your parents in this case are being generous if you're 21, but that's perfectly legitimate. The idea that you should suffer in order to learn virtue, on the other hand, is completely opposite to objectivism. Instead of teaching you independence, it's simply going to teach you that virtue, independence, and self-sustenance are miserable, that there's something you should hurt yourself doing. Now, if you're goofing off at school and not getting anything out of it, then yes, quit and suffer. But if you're rational, you have to avoid suffering. You have to learn by thinking, and then self-supporting is something you get pleasure from, something you look forward to when you're older, not a misery that you are going to pay back with your parents by enduring. That was interesting to me because I read it wrong, or rather, I read it as a guy who moved out of his parents' house at 18, wanted to get the hell out of there, tried to work my way through college on my own dime, and didn't have access to student loans back then, so I only made it through the 2-year degree, never quite finished at U of M. So it was interesting to read his answer because I was ready to come down hard on this guy and say, yes, of course, get out there and pay your dues. It's the only way you're going to learn anything. And then I remembered, oh yeah, in some families, parents send their kids to college and have professional careers. So that was interesting to read.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. Accepting help, and this is broader than just parents here. Accepting help does not make you a parasite. Depends on the kind of help and why the help is being given. Why make life more difficult than it has to be? If someone is helping you for their selfish reasons, if it's because they can afford it and it's because of your virtue, they see something positive in you, there is nothing immoral, nothing parasitical about accepting that kind of help. If it's offered, like a loan or something, a condition, you darn right you have to pay that back. That's your obligation. If it's offered because, no, you don't have to pay me back, I can afford this, and I really, really think selfishly for my purposes, I want to give this to you because you have potential here. Well, that doesn't create any obligation on your part. Why make your life harder than it has to simply because you want to be independent? Now, it's true, like you, I left home at 17. I was in New York City and getting a job, and and whatever help my parents did and could offer me, I did accept, but I wanted to. It was a weird thing. I wanted to minimize that. So I got my own guaranteed student loans and paid them back for my own college and law school. And it took a little time because I wanted to pay it back myself.
And I would pay back your student loans?
Oh yeah, isn't that amazing? Both my wife and college and fully paid back our loans. Isn't that astonishing? We figured when we were agreeing to a loan that put a moral and legal obligation on us to pay it back. I don't know.
Oh, anyway. Pshaw.
In any event, I have sympathized with that motive, and to some extent, maybe I should have accepted more help from my parents who could have given it and wanted to give it, and they did. I did accept some help for which I don't feel any guilt, because they wanted to. They thought it was worth it. I was their kid. They wanted me to succeed and have it. My mother didn't have a lot of it. She wanted me to have the advantages she didn't have. There is not, that was her selfishness, by the way. So there's nothing wrong in the world with accepting that kind of help. Yes, you do have to get on your own 2 feet. You do have to support yourself. To the extent we can, we've got to, when we can, get on our own 2 feet, declare our independence, and become self-sustaining, self-generated, to use the definition, Ayn Rand's definition of life, self-sustaining, self-generated action. We really can't live lives as parasites, of course. But that doesn't mean we have to make our lives more difficult than they have to be if the help is coming rationally and selfishly from the helper. That's the way I put it.
Excellent. Most excellent. Let me just read the last bit of his answer here. The only question you could legitimately ask is, what time frame is reasonable for my parents to support me before I become a parasite, as you mentioned? There's a lot of latitude there. It depends on what goal you're going after, how much money they have, and whether you can do part-time work. But early 20s to me is perfectly reasonable. I was supported until I was 23. And at that point, I finally got a job that enabled me to support myself, and I was given no more money. So I wouldn't have any problem thinking that you at 21 should enjoy it, certainly for several years. It is not your duty to suffer. Now, I wonder if, that sense of paying dues, I don't think I had any duty ethic with that. It was more a matter of, you've got to, pay for what you want. You've got to work hard to get what you want. But certainly if we have any young people out there who are just itching to leave the house at 18 because they think that's what independence requires, given my experience, and yours, I would say think twice about that.
Well, like I say, don't incur suffering that's unnecessary, right? If it truly is a rational trade on their part, they can afford it. You're not ruining their lives. They want to do it, and you're actually doing it to improve your life, and you're not wasting the money. All those are factors, of course. You don't want to, make your life harder than it has to be. That's the real point. On the other hand, it is virtuous to want to be independent. It is virtuous to want to be productive. It is virtuous to want to strike out on your own and be, there's a whole self-esteem pleasure that comes from that. Even if you have a context, say you've got the richest parents in the world, say your dad's Elon Musk or Bill Gates or something, and they're willing to give you, $10 million for whatever career and education you want to pursue. I could understand someone saying, no, I can do this on my own. And in fact, I want the greater value of developing the self-esteem that would come from doing it on my own. So on the one hand, I absolutely think it's virtuous and a good thing to want to be independent as soon as possible. And in fact, to get the self-esteem that comes from that. As I say, my parents probably could have afforded to help me more than they did. But boy, did I feel proud when I was able to take my dad to dinner. Hey, Dad, I'm in my early 20s and I can take you to dinner. That is a moment just of pride for me, all in itself. So I can totally understand the motive for this. Even if you have the resources, there is a certain self-esteem and pride that comes from independence. And when you can do it, do it. Because you will start getting that sense of independent self-esteem, pride, that does this positive feedback effect. So it's a judgment call. It absolutely is. Accepting help that minimizes the suffering in life makes perfect sense. Don't make your life more hellish than it has to be. On the other hand, when you're ready to jump the nest, jump that nest.
Yes. Outstanding. Well, I probably did that too early, working since I was 16, but I liked having money, and money is so much fun. Reading the money speech, Francisco's speech in Atlas Shrugged, I identified with that so much, having decided early on to get out there and earn as much of my own money as I could. But I think the point is well taken that yes, folks, if your parents want to continue to help you past the age of 18, there is no slight against your independence. that you don't jump out the door right then.
And it
Well,
applies
James,
more than just to your parents.
yeah, and anybody. It's one of the things I loved about having money at 16 and working the hours I did. It didn't help my high school grades, but yes, when friends of mine needed assistance or just it was fun to help them out, no sacrifice required. It's just great to be able to do that.
It's no sacrifice for me to help if I can afford it, and it really is a high value to me. It's absolutely no sacrifice. It's what I would prefer to spend my money on in that context. Absolutely correct. No doubt about that. There's no reason to delay one's independence and start developing the really positive value that is that self-esteem. On the other hand, there's no reason to inflict greater suffering on yourself than is necessary.
Right. Suffering is not the price of virtue.
No, it is not.
Well, sir, love these discussions. I hope for the folks who are either starting out their careers or, again, like me, are considering changes to their careers, have found this information clarifying. Dr. Peikoff's answers are, as always, outstanding, but James, your insights as well, and especially your personal anecdotes. I know you've suggested maybe talk about myself too much. No. The more the better. I think everybody in the chat agrees. So I thank you for that. Now, it's been fun doing this as a morning show, so I've got to give you extra thank yous for getting up so early. Or again, for those of you in the UK, it's now an afternoon show. You've been wondering, why do we have to watch everything at night? Now you get these morning shows. Want to see more of that happen? We do have coming up the Daily Objective again at, well, where I'm at in the East Coast of the United States, 1 o'clock, but 6 o'clock UK time, 1 o'clock Eastern, 10 o'clock on the Pacific side of things. Again, Nikos Sotirakopoulos is talking about Iran, understanding the country, understanding evil. That's going to be an outstanding episode.
Sure.
And I have to say, tomorrow I'm going to be giving my usual Thursday show, Life on Earth, and I'll be talking about joyfulness, living these ideas, and I'll tie in a little bit about it was International Talk Like a Pirate Day on Monday. So I'm going to get a little bit of that. I want to connect the two because I've talked about stealing or borrowing happiness, taking some of your happiness on credit, taking it ahead of time. I'll be talking about joyfulness tomorrow, using some of the same premises and with a little bit of the same fun.
Well, I can't wait. Sounds like we've got some great programs coming up. Do consider becoming a paid subscriber, and do hit like and hit that notification bell, make comments, share. All of that helps too. So yeah. I just want to thank all of our listeners for putting up with our shift in schedule here, and for all the help that those who have contributed. It really keeps the lights on around here and makes a difference. I think we're doing important work in creating a worldwide community of objectivism, students of objectivism. If you can think of a higher value for the world, I can't, then contribute to that. But it seems to me that a few pounds a month is a small price to pay for such an enormous value like saving civilization.
Yes, and maybe the one thing we don't ask for enough is share this content. Heck, we could double the amount of contributions we receive just by doubling the number of viewers. No sacrifice required. So yes, if you find these episodes compelling, or if you're not ready to share a whole show, watch, because I think by the end of the week, you're going to see short clips of things that James had to say on this episode. James, there were a few that were really standouts where you were talking and I could hear them becoming these 60-second sound bites that were outstanding.
Oh, thanks. There was one story that connects up with all of this, contributing to Ayn Rand Center UK and what we were talking about in terms of accepting help in career. Ayn Rand gave informal scholarships to many of her students who were pursuing careers, academic or artistic careers. She would often just give them money to help them finish their education, give them money to help them pursue their career. That was the hands-on, ground level kind of, quote, charity. And it wasn't charity in her mind. It was a selfish value for value thing that she was doing. Here's an example of someone helping out values that she could afford it. They were values to her. No sacrifice, and accepting that kind of help is good. And guess what? What she was doing was contributing to a change in the world by helping these intelligent students. That's how she saw it. If you have the same kind of mentality Ayn Rand does about helping your long-term values in this world, I can think of no better opportunity than contributing to the Ayn Rand Center UK.
Outstanding. Thank you, James. Thank you, everybody listening, watching. If you are listening or watching after the fact, of course, you can put in super thanks rather than super chat after the fact to contribute to the Ayn Rand Center UK. We will be back next Wednesday morning or afternoon if you're in Europe at 4 o'clock UK time, 11 o'clock in the morning Eastern time. And James, for you, 8 o'clock. No sacrifices, too great. James is up at 8 o'clock and presenting to us. James, you look pretty damn good for this early in the morning. Thank you for that.
Well, thank you. I tend to be a morning person, so I'm good with this.
Outstanding. We look forward to talking to all of you next week. Have an outstanding hour until the daily objective comes on. Thank you very much.
Take care.